Hello, everyone, and welcome back to part two of my interview with Mormon entrepreneur Jeremy Young. We've talked about his early years in the church, growing up, his mission, his meeting Molly, his marrying Molly. We've talked about creativity in his life and the love of music and of people, of magic a little bit, and how his Mormon upbringing in some ways set him up to do some really cool things afterwards. So thanks again for joining us, Jeremy. Welcome back. And so how do you become a millionaire in kind of a very short amount of time as a BYU student in the early 90s?
Sure.
I remember meeting you and learning about you and wishing I had figured out how to do that, because I wasn't in the same place you were at those early years. Mm-hmm. And I'm like, how did you do that? How did you do it?
Yeah, luck. It really was a lot of luck and persistence. So Molly and I were both looking for jobs, and we started out at the fundraising arm of BYU where we'd dial for dollars, and absolutely hated it. And so did that for a couple of months, and then found another job where there were inbound calls at a telemarketing company led by a guy named Tim Stay, and he had a company called Marketing Ally. Western Watts Direct, if you remember that. It's a big telemarketing company in Utah. And so applied, got the job, did inbound telemarketing calls for TV and radio and catalog companies, and eventually I moved up the ladder very quickly into management positions. And at that time, my lovely mother-in-law bought me a computer, which I'm super, super thankful for.
Was it a 8088, an XT? Do you remember?
It was probably a 186 or it maybe even a 286.
COmpaq or IBM or it doesn't matter, but I'm just curious.
I can't remember,
okay,
but I mean, it had like 4 megabytes of memory, and that was an upgrade that cost like $800. And I got a CRT 17-inch monitor, which I thought was just massive. I mean, it was top of the line stuff. And I ended up making friends. I went to the computer science area, made friends with people there, and they got me connected to the internet through BYU. And so it was an incredible experience. I mean, people don't understand it now, but that first time when you open up Mosaic web browser, this is before Netscape, before anything existed, and to load a picture that was from some server across the world, it was just basically pictures, text, and links. That's all we had back then, right? Was just magical. I mean, it was magical. I couldn't believe what I was seeing, that there could be communication around the world through a network of computers. I mean, now it's just, oh yeah, you got it on your phone, you have it everywhere. But back then, mind-blowing. And so I knew that was something that I could make money on, just instantly. And so I went to Tim Stay and I said, hey, Tim, we've got to create a new arm of this company, and we need to take and build websites for your clients, because people are going to move, everything's going to be done on the internet. People are going to be shopping on the internet. We were taking inbound calls for Rush Limbaugh. So he would sell his ties and his books, and we would take the phone orders. I said, let's just contact Rush Limbaugh. Let's build out a website for him. We'll show his ties. People can order. We'll build out the shopping cart system. And
I was watching the Rush Limbaugh TV show while you were doing this.
Yeah, probably.
I was a fan of Rush Limbaugh.
Yeah, so was I. I mean, I was totally into conservative talk radio. Anyway, and so Tim said, let's do it. He gave us the money, and we hired a guy named Matt Mullen to help us. And Matt Mullen is still working with me today. He's been with me with every single one of my businesses. Amazing guy. He's a marketing genius. I hired a guy named Jeff Barrett, who really good friend of mine. And we basically started building websites and building shopping carts. And I remember when SSL, the security protocol, came out, that we were able to actually take these credit cards securely over the internet. I mean, it was a game changer. And that's when Netscape was released. And started slowly building up other people's websites. We did megahertz and US robotics modems. We did Proform Fitness treadmills, little window decals shop. We did a cremation urn shop, believe it or not. And so we would develop these websites for these companies.
Now, was this before Dreamweaver? Was this before there were WYSIWYG website developers?
Way before.
So you're just doing raw HTML code?
Yeah, just all hand by hand.
In some little editor?
Yeah, just text editor.
Yeah. And so you're learning HTML and CSS?
Yeah, CSS didn't even exist.
Okay.
I mean, this was just basic HTML. I mean, really easy stuff.
Yeah.
But some of the code behind the scenes for shopping carts was something that had to be developed, and we were one of the first. And so Rush Limbaugh would get on the radio and say, go to rushties.com. And here we are with this little server that we rented in downtown Salt Lake, and it would just melt. I mean, 4 megabytes of memory, and we're like, Tim, we need 16 megabytes of memory. Well, how much does that cost? It's going to be $3,200. I mean, literally, that for 16 megabytes. We're not even talking about gigabytes. We're talking about megabytes. And so, Rush Limbaugh would be calling me on my phone and screaming at me.
So you've spoken with Rush Limbaugh?
Yeah, he would call me.
Are you kidding me?
No, he would call me between commercials. He's like, what the hell's going on? And I'm a 22-year-old kid, 23-year-old kid. Just I didn't even know what to even say to him. I'm so sorry, Rush. And then his handlers would be screaming at me, and it was stressful. That was my first foray into really dealing with people and clients, and we were actually renting our servers from a company called iServer in Orem, Utah. And I got to know those guys really well because we would pay them for all of our clients' websites every month, and it was a reoccurring revenue stream for them. And I really loved the idea of reoccurring revenue and web hosting. And so I actually went to iServer, and I said, listen, I want to develop a private label of your services, and I want to call it vServers. And would you allow me to resell your services? And so they did. And I was teaching HTML at BYU at the time. And a guy named Steve Jenkins was in my class. He's getting his MBA, needed a credit to graduate. And here he was. He owned a website called Windows95.com. And before Microsoft even thought about the internet, Steve registered this domain name. If you remember, Windows 95, they didn't even have a web browser included. So Steve registered the domain name, and it was a big shareware. People could download free software, drivers, tips and tricks. And so Steve and
not just that, but Bill Gates is sort of famous for having predicted that the internet wasn't going to be that big of a deal. And
right.
So, and there was a reason for that, because the internet posed a real strategic threat to Microsoft. Microsoft relied on you installing this massive operating system and then all these massive products like PowerPoint and Word and Excel all onto your desktop so that then you could do whatever you wanted to do. The promise of the internet was all you needed was a browser and an internet connection and a hard drive. You didn't even need a super sophisticated microprocessor.
Dumb terminals, right?
Yeah, well, thin clients or dumb terminals. Yep. And you could do everything you wanted over a browser. That's and right. I have to think that Microsoft delayed the progress of the world by fighting and challenging and delaying the interest in the internet because it didn't want to lose the desktop licensing revenue.
Absolutely.
So Microsoft was late to the internet game.
Right. Because remember when Netscape went public, I think that was the shot across the bow to Microsoft.
Yeah.
I think at that point they're like, okay, the web browser could become an operating system and everything could be run out of a web browser, which we do now. And so that was the shot across the bow.
And so then Microsoft builds the browser into the operating system
right.
So that you need all of the thick, heavy client stuff to run the browser because they just don't want their desktop revenue going anywhere. And that led to a DOJ, Department of Justice, lawsuit, antitrust lawsuit.
Right.
That's a lot more detail than people need. We're geeking out here. But anyway, you jumped on that situation, you and your buddy.
Yeah, so Steve had that Windows95.com domain name, and so it was extremely popular. Hundreds of thousands of users coming. And so I went to Steve and said, listen, I want to start reselling iService services under the brand name of vServers. I've created a website. I want you to market it. So you have the traffic. Why don't you put advertisements and icons about vServers on Windows95.com, and that will push traffic to vServers. And so he agreed. We started a partnership.
So just to kind of dumb it down into like language for people who aren't techie, you've got this friend with this Windows 95 website,
right?
and you want to create a hosting company
Yes.
of virtual servers. So all
That's
these
right.
machines, you've done it for Rush Limbaugh. You're like, now I know how to set up a computer so that it can act as a server for websites.
Correct.
Now let's create this farm of servers
That's right.
in some warehouse so that we can do this for a lot of people.
Right.
And
so
help
we wouldn't
host a lot of websites.
exactly. So we wouldn't
Kind of like Bluehost is now, or
That's right.
Is that right?
Yeah. So we wouldn't. We didn't want to create the content. I didn't want to create content. That wasn't fun for me. I had Rush Limbaugh screaming at me all the time. What I wanted to do was actually have the servers and then have people come and build their own websites, host their email, host their e-commerce on the websites that the servers that I control. So if it's basically, it's like GoDaddy now. So GoDaddy, they register your domain name, they give you a place to put your web pages, they make it super easy. That's what vServers was. And so Steve had a lot of traffic. And so I remember sitting in my apartment on day one, right, where we opened this up, and I had no idea what I was doing. And Steve turned it on his website, and all of a sudden I'm looking at my log files and I'm seeing traffic coming in, and an order appears. And with that order, we were profitable from the first minute that we turned on that website. We were profitable because I didn't have any expenses. So, I mean, the hosting was being done by another company, even though it was rebranded as us. Everyone thought that, I mean, no one knew it was iServer doing it. They thought it was vServers hosting because we were just white labeling it. And then another order comes in, and another order comes in.
So you avoided all that overhead capital investment
That's
cost by outsourcing that.
That's correct.
And
Yeah,
you became a middleman.
we did. At the time, we were a middleman. And
Did you do that why didn't you want to get the capital investment, build the server
I
farms?
didn't know how to do all that. I mean, I had no idea. It would have been a lot of money, and I didn't have the
lot of risk.
technical skills to even build it.
Was it smart to go that route
Absolutely.
for you? Okay, tell
Absolutely.
us
Well, I mean, just like you said, there was no risk. I mean, either
why. You're profitable day
yeah,
one.
profitable day one, and so I could just sit in my apartment, do my schoolwork, and basically handle customer service, and away we went. And so Steve was pushing traffic, and it was fun. I mean, that was back when that was 94, 90. Yeah, no. That was about 94, 95 is when it was, because in 96 we had hired a couple of employees. So a guy named Matt Smith. And he handled all the kind of technical support and helping people with their websites when they're having problems. And then Matt Mullen, he kind of did the same type of thing. And so those were our first two employees. And then Steve got a job at Microsoft. And so left Provo. They hired him, even though he owned this Windows95.com domain, they hired him to kind of help them with that whole browser expansion and to help with some of the building of their operating systems. And so Steve contacted me and said, hey, you should really think about moving up here. You know, this is kind of the tech capital of the world now. Everything is happening here on the internet. Microsoft is exploding. They're starting to build web browsers. This is where it's at. And so Molly and I packed up, and Matt and Mike, they followed us and moved up to Issaquah, which is where we met you for the first time.
So did you end up selling that business, or what happened?
We did. So we ended up back in probably 98 teaming up with a guy named Lynn Castle, and he had internet access business. It was called Light Realm. And so he would provide DSL and point-to-point internet connectivity and dedicated web hosting. He worked with Steven Spielberg on some of his nonprofits and connecting hospitals. And so we teamed up with them, and they helped us create our own technology, which was pretty unique at the time, the virtual server technology, to move off of iServer and to put all of that content of all of our customers onto our own servers in Seattle.
So you ended up doing your own.
We did, yeah. We built our own technology, and we moved over. And that was in 98. And then in December of 99, we sold the business to Micron Electronics.
To Micron?
Micron, yeah.
So
they were trying to do internet.
They were massive at the time.
Roll up. They were
probably
massive.
Still are. I don't know.
Yeah. They were big, and so they knew that they wanted to get out of hardware, like computer hardware. They're still doing their memory, but they wanted to get out of computer hardware, and they wanted to do a roll up of internet services. Because what they realized was that the internet was going all cloud-based, that people would run applications through web browsers, kind of like what we talked about, and they really wanted to get into the space. So they acquired us, a company called Host Pro out of LA. They acquired another company out of Boise. And after they acquired us, they did a roll-up with a company called Interland down in Atlanta, Georgia. They moved everybody that wanted to go down there, shut all the other offices down. And now it's called web.com. So still a big web hosting company that's publicly traded and doing pretty well.
And I guess you would have made good money from that sale, right?
Yeah. I became a multi-millionaire at the age of 28. And it was surreal. I mean, it happened so fast, right? And with the timing,
that was 4 years,
about 4 or 5 years. It happened very, very quickly.
And it wasn't through stock options or, it was through a company you helped start and run.
Yeah, and we had 150 employees. We had a massive office space in Bellevue on the I-90 corridor. Just loved it. Just the best time of my life. I mean, just building this company with friends and had family working for me, and it was just fun. And but we were lucky because 4 months after that, the stock market crashed, the capital markets closed. If we probably would have been dead. And so that timing was just incredibly, incredibly lucky.
Yeah.
Yeah. So and then working for a publicly traded company, I realized quickly that one, I didn't have the skill set as an entrepreneur with not a ton of experience. I mean, I had some experience under my belt, but I was still very young to deal with people running a publicly traded company and just the backbiting and the politics intense. And the craziness that existed within that. I was supposed to be there for 2 years running that division, and I negotiated myself out after a year. I couldn't do it. It was just too hard.
It wasn't the 9/11 that crashed the economy. What was the...
No, this was just, remember when the NASDAQ, all the tech companies crashed? So the NASDAQ went from 5,500 down to 2,000 or something in a period of time.
98?
No, that was in the year 2000.
Okay.
2001.
Okay.
Yeah,
right.
And then we had another crash after 9/11. So it was just massive.
It was the tech bubble burst, right?
The tech bubble burst.
I remember that. Yeah. Okay, and that's right around the time Margie and I moved to Seattle. So,
right.
So we were in the same ward, right?
We were in the same ward. Yeah. So also we adopted our first baby. So McKenna was given to us through LDS Social Services.
So you guys had some fertility?
We did. Yeah.
What was that like? Let's talk about that because there are a lot of listeners that.
So we probably tried to start having kids in 94, and we adopted in the middle of 99. So, a good period of time where we were dealing with infertility for 6 or 7 years. And, it's tough. I think it would have been a lot harder if we were still in Utah than it was living in more of a progressive liberal ward in Seattle, where I feel like our ward was more progressive in Seattle. In fact, I remember Phil Bussey, our bishop at the time, telling me that I wasn't drinking coffee at the time, but he told me if someone came in and was drinking decaffeinated coffee, he for sure would give them a Temple Recommend. And that blew my mind at the time, right? Because he was a progressive Mormon, and he wasn't black and white, which is incredible. And so, so we dealt with infertility for years. We went through not in vitro, but we did the artificial insemination multiple times.
What's that like for a young Mormon couple to deal with issues of fertility in a church where kids and family and posterity really mean everything?
It was devastating. I mean, really, it's like, Molly has to see families and kids and people being pregnant weekly at church. And for her especially, I mean, for me, I was so busy with work and building this business career that I don't think it affected me as much. For me, I kind of liked the time alone with Molly. I mean, I felt that, I always thought it's crazy when people get married at 18 and immediately get pregnant. I mean, you just don't have a foundation to build a relationship on. And so for me, I considered it almost a blessing, even though it was starting to get a little long in the tooth because it was taking so long. But for Molly, it was just devastating. It was just hard. I mean,
she's probably watching women have multiple pregnancies.
Oh, absolutely.
While she couldn't even have one.
Absolutely. And so she would, like amazing people like Kathy Bull, Trevor Bull. I mean, they would basically just grab Molly and say, hey, come with us. And Kylie, their first baby, felt like Molly's baby. I mean, she spent so much time. And so, we had great people surrounding us, the Warrens. I mean, just, down to earth, salt of the earth, incredible Mormons.
But the other thing is to kind of be wealthy but not to be able to have kind of a thing that really comes easy to people. In fact, even like you'll see parents who aren't responsible having kids, or
Right.
single moms out of wedlock.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
that must be a tough contrast to like have everything you could want and not the most important thing.
Yeah.
That almost might make it worse.
Yeah, I haven't thought in that way, but 100% true. 100% true.
Yeah.
And so felt like we had so much, but we couldn't have a baby. And so we LDS Social Services, back when they were actually doing adoptions, we filled out the little scrapbook of our life and our travels, and we were a pretty cute couple back then. Molly's beautiful and young, and she's adopted, and so we had multiple offers of babies, and it came so fast we were just shocked. And we just didn't feel good about the first couple that were offered us. And we just, the adoption agency's like, what in the heck? That seems so strange. And so...
To turn something down?
Yeah, to turn something down. And so eventually there was a woman in Boise that really wanted us. And we'd already been offered another baby from that adoption agency. And she said, if Jeremy and Molly don't take my baby, I'm just going to keep her. And, Molly had dreams about a baby girl with lots of dark hair. And so we turned down this baby that was offered to us. It ended up being a boy. And they said, well, we were hoping that would happen because, this girl wants you to have this baby. And we just knew it was right. And
what's making you feel so emotional telling the story?
Lots of things. One is just how amazing my daughter is.
Who? What's
McKenna.
her name? McKenna. Your oldest.
Mm-hmm. Just amazing, beautiful, strong-willed, smarter than I could ever be, and just can't imagine life without her. And the other thing is, this birth mother actually handed us the baby, and knowing the pain that she went through, to give us that gift. Pretty amazing. How do you repay something like that? So the pain that she was going through and the happiness that we were experiencing.
So it's an open adoption then?
It wasn't open, but we sent letters and pictures for a couple of years.
You knew the address?
We would just send it to the adoption agency, and they would send it on.
Okay.
And since then, they've connected somewhat. And
McKenna with her biological mom?
Yeah, exactly. And so they haven't met. I think it's going to take some time for McKenna to be ready for that. And that's her story. And once she's ready, we'll support it 100%. But, with Molly being adopted, she's the perfect mom for McKenna. I mean, she understands what she's feeling and going through. And, it was just a perfect situation for what was happening.
How do you make sense, seeing how much you love McKenna, how do you make sense of the fact that it was the church that brought you together with her?
I don't have any bad feelings against the church, really. I mean...
No, I would expect
right?
gratitude.
So tons of gratitude. I mean, it was just a magical experience. And, everything from when we, at 6 months when the adoption was final and the sealing of McKenna to us, I mean, just lovely. I mean, just amazing experiences. And so super, super thankful for that. I know they don't do adoptions anymore for a variety of reasons. But yeah, it's just meant to be. So yeah. If there is a God, that was meant to be for sure.
Yeah. Beautiful. And it's kind of sad the church doesn't do that anymore.
Yeah, in some ways. And in some ways I can see some of the damage it
better.
might do to some of these birth mothers who felt coerced into giving these babies up when they really didn't want to.
Yeah.
And so in some ways it's very beautiful on the receiving end, but on the giving end, I can see how difficult and how hard and how damaging that can be. And so I don't know how I feel about it now. I don't know if the church should be in the adoption business.
Yeah.
Just from the coercion aspect of it.
Yeah.
There was a lot of coercion.
I remember there was this like Janice Cat Perry like song that they'd play on all the church pop radio stations on like Sounds for Sunday, and it was basically a song about from God's arms to my arms to yours.
Yeah, I love that song.
It's a great song.
Loved it.
But it's basically like give the baby away, give the baby away,
right.
give the baby away. And as beautiful as it was,
Right.
it almost felt like it was kind of like a PR move to generate supply for LDS Family Services, right?
Yeah, for sure. And it's unfortunate because, I mean, the church is all about families, and you have these infertile couples that cannot have kids, and what are they going to do? You know,
What's their plan?
What's their plan? They
Yeah.
have to have kids in order to fulfill their destiny and fulfill their obligations within the church and to be this forever family. And it creates a lot of pressure, a lot of negativity, a lot of shame and guilt.
Yeah.
And so for the adoptive mothers who are giving up babies, a lot of shame and guilt, tons.
Yeah.
And then for us, the shame and guilt of not being able to have kids, and then the shame and guilt knowing what the adoptive mother, the birth mother's going through and giving us their baby. I mean, it's incredible.
Yeah.
It really is. And
Well-
so hopefully it's a happy ending.
Love to McKenna and Molly and all the other biological kids.
Yeah, yeah.
You ended up having...
We did. So adopted in June of '99, and Molly got pregnant a couple months after. And so she actually cried. She was like, "I'm having so much fun with my baby. I can't be pregnant." But Julia came in October of 2000, and then our son Kai was born a couple years after that. So
3 kids.
3 kids. You know, it was funny because Molly looks so young. I mean, even now, we were just in Santa Barbara doing wine tastings, and people thought she was in her early 30s. And you can imagine back then, I mean, she looked like she was 16.
Yeah,
right?
she did.
And here she was at Bellevue Square, liberal Seattle, pushing a son in a front pack, pushing a stroller with 2 kids. And everyone thought she was a nanny. And then when they would talk to her and find out they were the mom, they would just shake their head in disgust. You know? So yeah, we got them over with very quickly, and they're just wonderful, wonderful kids.
And I wanna now kind of jump into the track of your kind of evolving faith, but just talk quickly about to kind of leave the entrepreneurial track.
Sure.
You've started several businesses.
I have,
Just talk us just at a high level through.
Okay.
Just super high level,
Yep.
some of the businesses you've
So
created.
back in the late 90s, one of the struggles that websites had was determining the analytics portion of of who was coming to their website. You know, where were they coming from, who they were, what browsers they were using. And so I contacted a friend of mine, Josh James. And,
Who I've met.
Yep, good guy. And John Pastana, awesome guy. And created a company called Superstats. And it basically allowed anybody to take a piece of JavaScript, put it on every page of the website they wanted to track. And then we would create pretty graphs of the analytics in real time, which was kind of unusual. I mean, most people would download massive log files. It would run overnight on a machine. Then we'd give an archaic report, and it was already out of date by the time you looked at it. So, we created a company called Superstats. And unfortunately, through some pressure that I had with my other business partners, not necessarily loving that I had a business outside of vServers, I ended up selling that, and that became Omniture, which went public and acquired by Adobe for $1.8 billion. So it would be a much different situation right now if I still had some of that stock. So
That's part of being an entrepreneur,
It is,
right?
it is.
You buy and sell, and you get in and out.
yeah,
And
but good on them. I mean, man, Josh and John, they were ready to go bankrupt at one point and figured it out. I mean, they were literally ready to close their doors, and they figured it out. And Josh he's a salesman, right? He's an amazing business guy, and John is an amazing tech guy, and good for them. Now Josh is doing Domo, and they just went public. And, he's an incredible guy.
And for those who don't know, there's this whole Silicon Slopes phenomenon now in Utah where kind of there are parts of Utah, maybe around Highland and Lehigh and Alpine, Thanksgiving Point, where they're building all these high rises and they're trying to create or are creating kind of a mini Silicon Valley here in Salt Lake City. And whether it's Qualtrics or Domo or the Adobe stuff,
Serve Point.
there are these sort of 4 or 5 just high-flying entrepreneur kind of million/billionaires. I don't know if they're billionaires yet, but
Hundreds of millions, probably.
it's certainly transforming Utah.
Absolutely.
And driving up real estate value.
Yeah. And I feel like I had a small part in that, which is kind of fun.
You sure did.
So.
You absolutely did.
Yeah. And then after I sold my company, my friend Blaise Francois again, he introduced me to these German games. And we played Settlers of Catan, Die Siedler von Catan. And I fell in love with German games.
German board games.
German board games.
Yeah.
And so kind of the geeky European games that take an hour to 2 to play, that are 8 and up, strategy and luck, super great themes. Nothing like American games, right? I mean, don't think about Monopoly or Clue or anything like that. I mean, these games are incredible.
Ticket to Ride, Carcassone.
Ticket to Ride was supposed to be my game.
Yeah.
So let me tell you how I got to that. So
Okay.
I decided that I was just going to, I didn't know anything about board games. I was just going to start a board game company. I called it Uberplay. And Uberplay partnered up with the author of Settlers of Catan. His son Guido was my business partner, Klaus Teuber. And Guido, who was getting his MBA in George Washington University at the time. And Matt Mullen, who again is someone I've worked with my entire life. And we started this company. And I just flew over to Germany to one of these big board game conferences and started meeting game authors like Rainer Knizia and Wolfgang Kramer and Stefan Dora and Alan Moon and Aaron Weisblum. I mean, all these great game designers that would design games for the German market. Because in Germany, board games are huge. So the Spielessen is the board game festival where there's about 100,000 consumers that come with families and they play board games for 3 or 4 days. And you play all the newest releases. Think of it as E3 for board games. And so I went over there, started meeting everybody, met publishers, printers, and started to develop a business model where I would take prototypes or completed games that were sold in Germany and then publish them for the American market. And one of the games that we decided to do is take Settlers of Catan and retheme it for the Mormon market. And we created a game called Settlers of Zarahemla. And so our good friend Miles Germer, who you know, he developed the graphics for the game. And we launched it and we sold probably 30 to 40,000 copies into Deseret Book over a couple of years. I mean, it was our biggest hit. And the Mormons love Settlers of Catan, and they just fell in love with the Settlers of Zarahemla game. And we rethemed it where we added an extra thing where you could build a temple, and all the playing cards had prophets on them, and Book of Mormon themed stuff. And it was a lot of fun. It was very creative. We did about 50 different games. We won Games Magazine Game of the Year for one of our games, but we could not make any money. We couldn't get distribution, and we could not make any money with that game. And
as I thought about it then, as I'm thinking about it now, the profit margins in tech can be so large with software, with write once and run multiple places. I just wondered, like, with board games, you're getting back to materials.
That's right.
Warehousing.
Absolutely.
Like profitability-wise, I'm like, why did he go in that direction?
Margins are super thin.
Yeah.
Right? Especially when
you were just doing it because you loved it.
Oh, yeah, totally.
You just loved board games.
Loved it.
Like, I remember when I first, I knew you and Molly, but we never hung out.
Yeah.
I don't think. But then I think you had me and Joel over.
Yeah, we played games in our house.
And you showed us New England, which I ended up buying.
Yep.
And I think I played Carcassone maybe for the first time with you.
Okay.
I think. But
Probably.
anyway,
I mean,
we had a board game night.
Yep.
And that's where I learned about your love for Joseph Smith. And I don't know if you had, Truman Madsen tapes or something, but you seemed to really be into Joseph Smith.
I did.
At that time.
I did, yeah. And in fact, I would listen. One thing I didn't mention is I fell in love with exotic sports cars. And so because I was a newfound millionaire, I was buying crazy cars like Ferrari for a 360 Spider and a BMW Z8 and Porsches and I just loved it. I mean, it wasn't about hey, look at me. I actually loved the driving experience of these cars. I always thought about it and dreamed of it as a kid, and it was just super fun. I did road rallies across the United States in Ferraris, and that was a good experience for me. But Ticket to Ride. So Alan Moon, the author, right?
It's a great game.
Great game. One of the best.
Train game.
Yeah.
Definitely one of the best games.
And so he sends me the prototype. So I've got it cut out. Everything is just prototypey. I mean, it's just pieces cut and fake trains and cards that are handwritten. And so he sends it to me, and I'm leaving to go on a family reunion. So I leave it on my desk. I get back in 2 weeks, and game group comes up and we play it, and I'm like, this is genius. This is really, really good. Call Alan and say, Alan, I want the game. And he's like, I just sold it to Days of Wonder.
Oh,
I know, like days before he sold it to Days of Wonder. It becomes the German game of the year, and it's sold, who knows what, 8 million copies now in all their forms. And
what would it have cost you to buy it?
So usually $1,000 down payment and royalties and 8 to 10% royalty on whatever we made. So if we sold it to a distributor at 50 to 60% off, we'd pay 8% of that to Alan, 10% of it to Alan.
So you would have made millions?
Yeah, if we would have got German Game of the Year, we would have made millions.
Oh, bummer.
Yeah, it would have been good.
All right, so really quickly, just to close out this episode,
Sure.
your career, just talk through the different jobs, kind of things you've started and anything you've learned from that.
Yeah, so then I took my board game inventory that I wanted to liquidate, and I started a company called Tanga, which is what I'm doing now. And it's a daily deal company where we sell, it used to be just board games and family entertainment products, but we've expanded into full-fledged marketplace. So think of us as an Overstock meets Groupon with daily deals, and still continue to run that. Actually, some cool things are happening that we'll be able to announce over the next probably a couple weeks. And so that's been the past 12 years of my life. And so really, I've been focusing on that over the past 12 years. I own some clothing stores with my brother. He's a bishop in Layton. Great guy. And those clothing stores are here in Utah. I own part of a pawn shop up in northern Idaho with one of my best friends I met on my mission, Forrest Anderson. Amazing dude, just love him to death. What else? I got involved, you'll find this interesting. So I worked with Miles Germer, who you know, and my friend John and Nablis, and we were developing a Diablo-type video game for Pocket PCs, and really early, right? If only we would have done that 5 years later when the iPhone came out, we would have had an amazing game company, and we just couldn't get traction with it. But it was super fun. The technology behind it was unique, patentable, super fast, great graphics, and we had a great storyline, but we just couldn't get it off the ground.
So part 3 is going to be all about his faith crisis and his faith journey, and you'll want to stay tuned for that. But just to close out this chapter on being an entrepreneur, like you've had downs too. You've had ups,
Absolutely.
But you've had downs.
Absolutely.
Just for those who are like wanting to be an entrepreneur, thinking about it, reflections of an entrepreneur to close out this episode. The positive, the negative, the good, the bad, the hard.
Yeah.
You
Man,
know,
some of the worst down moments of your life will be an entrepreneur, where you feel like you have lost everything. Because I've been there. I've been there multiple times where you feel like everything is going to collapse and disappear, and you're going to have to start over. And you do. Somehow you figure it out. Like you just make it work. Something happens. Like you meet someone that's all of a sudden, I'm interested in giving you $100,000 to help you out. Or you have an idea that gets sparked and you act on it and it saves the company. Or, but you also have the most amazing highs as just building something from scratch and building businesses that support other people's families and creates value and provide you a lifestyle that you enjoy. I can't imagine doing anything else but just being an entrepreneur, and I haven't. I mean, I've been an entrepreneur since I've been in grade school, selling gummy worms and Tootsie Rolls, and I love it. It's super hard. It can be hard on your family, right? So there's times where I'm just non-existent because there's crisis, there's travel, and I'm not at home. And Molly's just, oh man, she's been amazing. Just great support, has supported me in everything that I've ever wanted to do. And I don't think it would be almost impossible to be an entrepreneur without a wife like that. It would be almost impossible. So
kudos to Molly.
Yeah.
Shout out to Molly.
Yeah, she's awesome. Amazing person.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But you've loved it.
Loved it.
No, never going back to work for the man.
Oh man, not unless I have to. If I did, it would be in a partnership with the man where they could supply me money and I could build the business. That's interesting because I've always bootstrapped my businesses, and it's hard. It's hard. And I think it would be fun to have a lot of money behind me where I could actually go out and build something really, really big. I mean, not that my other businesses haven't been big. I mean, a $50 million web hosting company is a big web hosting company. But, I think I have the potential to build something massive. It'd be a lot of fun.
All right. Well, that's fascinating. This concludes part 2 of our interview with Jeremy Young about his adventures as an entrepreneur. And I should just ask, you talk about incredible highs and then like lows, feeling like you've lost everything. Is that a foreshadowing to your faith crisis journey a little bit?
It's interesting because at one point they kind of coincided. And so, yes.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So that's a hook to come right back for part 3, where we're going to talk about Jeremy's faith journey and where that's taken him in his life. So thanks for joining us on Mormon Stories Podcast, and we'll see you on the flip side for part 3.